The announcement echoed coldly through the speakers, blending with the rumble of rolling suitcases across the marble floor of JFK. But in the midst of the rush, one unexpected moment froze the entire first-class cabin. Seat 2A, the coveted window seat often seen as the throne of the cabin, had been taken, and the woman occupying it dared to look straight at the rightful passenger and calmly say, "You must be mistaken." Amara Blake stopped, her steps locked in place, her breath steady, but her eyes flashing sharp as steel. At just 42, she carried the aura of someone who had fought through 1,000 silent battles. The ivory blazer draped perfectly over her shoulders, her cropped hair sleek and modern, and her gaze so piercing it made people wonder who she really was. To an ordinary passenger, she looked like any elegant businesswoman. But in her handbag, along with her passport and boarding pass, was a key to power no one could imagine. Sitting in 2A was Whitney Carlyle. Blonde hair pinned neatly, crimson lipstick, icy blue eyes, scrutinizing everything before her. A Vuitton bag dangled from the armrest as though claiming ownership of the seat. Whitney did not need to ask questions or check closely. One glance was enough for her to assume Amara did not belong there. "Excuse me, this is my seat. My boarding pass clearly says 2A. Amara held out her pass, her voice even, low and steady. Whitney smirked, laughing as if she had just heard a joke. "Oh, darling, I'm already sitting here. They'll find you a seat more suitable. Surely there's something back there." The word suitable landed like a slap. Passengers nearby shifted uncomfortably. A man coughed into his fist, masking his disapproval. A woman clutched her child closer, avoiding eye contact. Everyone understood the undertone in Whitney's voice. People like Amara did not deserve to be here. Amara drew in a deep breath. She had felt this stare before, at Ivy League meetings, during glass-walled negotiations, that look of doubt that clung like an old scar, never healing, always stinging when touched. She held the ticket closer. "This is my seat. 2A. Whitney did not even glance. She pulled her cashmere shawl tighter, folding her arms like an untouchable queen. "I've flown platinum for 12 years. I know how things work. Trust me, they'll find you something more fitting further back." Each word sliced at her dignity. But Whitney had no idea, and could not yet know, that one signature from Amara could shake the very foundations of this airline. A young flight attendant, Lena Park, approached, uniform crisp, smile stretched thin in an attempt to calm the tension. "Ms. Blake, we do have seat 3C available. Perhaps you'd consider it to resolve this quickly." Amara locked eyes with Lena. That gaze forced people to pause, to question their own words. "Why should I move when my seat is clearly assigned to me?" Her voice was low, not loud, but sharp as polished steel. The cabin fell silent. A young woman in the row behind, Mia Nguyen, 22, discreetly raised her phone and began live streaming to a few hundred followers. The number spiked instantly. The caption read, "First-class drama breaking out at JFK." Viewers flooded in with comments. "Looks like discrimination. Hold your ground, sister." Amara sat tall. Inside, anger swelled, but her face stayed calm, as if carved from stone. She remembered reporters asking, "Are you really the CEO, or just the face?" She remembered investors sneering that she needed a white partner to inspire trust. Ghosts of memory crowded her, whispering in this luxurious cabin. Whitney leaned closer, her voice low but sharp enough for the row to hear. "Let's be clear. I don't know what game you're playing, but people like you don't usually show up in first class. Everyone can see that." The air cracked. Passengers gasped. Murmurs surged. The live stream exploded, thousands pouring in, comment boxes filling. Did she really just say that? "Zoom in! I can't believe it!" Amara's heart pounded, but her face did not flinch. Every eye locked on her, curious, embarrassed, expectant. She met them all, one by one, then turned back to Whitney. A razor-thin smile crossed her lips. "This is my seat. I'm not going anywhere." The silence was suffocating. Even the cockpit door cracked open, as if the pilots themselves wanted to hear. Whitney lifted her chin, thinking arrogance and a platinum card would shield her. But she had no idea the woman she dismissed held the power to decide the fate of this flight. On Mia's phone, views soared past 10,000. A pinned comment blazed. "This isn't about a seat. This is about dignity." Amara closed her eyes for a fleeting second, then opened them, steady and bright. The light within them was not of a humiliated passenger, but of a leader hidden in plain sight. And no one, not Whitney Carlyle with her icy disdain, not the flustered flight attendant, not the stunned passengers, yet realized the reveal that was coming would upend not just first class, but the world outside. The whispers were no longer restrained. Phones were now held openly, the glow of their screens sweeping across the cabin, casting pale light over tense faces. It was as if everyone had been seated in a theater, waiting for the next act of an unexpected play. Whitney Carlyle shrugged and let out a derisive laugh. "You're only embarrassing yourself. Platinum members like me are always given priority. It's the unwritten rule." Her words landed heavy, like a judge's gavel. Behind her, a middle-aged man hissed, "Shameless!" The woman beside him nodded firmly, eyes locked on her recording screen. Amara Blake tightened her grip on the boarding pass. Inside her chest, a storm churned. Anger, exhaustion, sorrow, at having to fight a battle she had faced her entire life. But outwardly, she was carved from stone. There is no such rule. The only truth is this. This seat belongs to me. Lead attendant Lena Park swallowed hard, her voice softening as she tried to placate. "Ms. Blake, if you could move to 3C, we can take off sooner. Other passengers are getting impatient." All eyes turned toward her. A dangerous silence lingered. Amara slowly pivoted, fixing her gaze on Lena. That look pierced through every excuse like a needle through cloth. "You are asking the rightful passenger to give up her seat to the one who stole it. That is not a solution. That is surrender." The words echoed through the cabin. An elderly couple nodded, murmuring, "She's right." A young man whispered, "This is blatant discrimination." Whitney scoffed, her voice sharp and mocking. "Oh, please. It's just a seat. You're acting like the world is ending over something so trivial." But Amara's reply froze the air. "Yes, It is just one seat. But how many times in our lives have we been told to stand so someone else could sit? How many times has dignity been dismissed like a worthless boarding pass? Breaths quickened. A woman in row 4 whispered, "She's speaking for all of us." Meanwhile, Mia Nguyen's phone buzzed wildly. Viewers surged, 15,000, 20,000, 30,000. Comments poured in like a storm. "Stand your ground, sister. We've lived this too. It's not just a seat, it's a system." Whitney's brow furrowed as she realized support was tilting toward Amara. Her jaw tightened, her voice sharp with venom. "Do you even know who I am?" Amara tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Not yet, but I will. And more importantly, you will know who I am." The cabin shivered. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a prophecy, laid down like stone. Up front, Captain Rafael Morales had just been briefed by Lena. He frowned, sighing heavily. In 30 years of flying, he had weathered storms, engine failures, crises mid-air, but rarely had he seen a cabin stretched this taut over. A single seat. He decided he would step out and address it himself. The cockpit door opened. He emerged, tall and broad, shouldered, silver streaks in his hair, his voice steady. "Good evening, everyone. I understand there's an issue with a seat." Whitney straightened immediately, her tone dripping with false victimhood. "Captain, thank goodness you're here. I requested this seat earlier. That woman is causing trouble. She refuses to move so this flight can depart." Amara remained still, as if testing how far the farce would go. Every eye in the cabin bore down on the captain as he took the boarding pass from her hand. Seat 2A, Amara Blake. Clear, undeniable. Relief swept the cabin for a brief moment, only to freeze again when Morales spoke. "It's true, this is your seat, Ms. Blake. But to save time, perhaps you might consider moving to 3C. A wave of outrage rippled. Older passengers shook their heads. A young man cursed under his breath. Several phones were raised higher, recording every word. Amara lifted her chin, her gaze fixed firmly on the captain. "So the one who is wrong is rewarded, and the one who is right is forced to lose? If that is so, then let us be honest. This is not customer service. This is favoritism." Her words cracked through the cabin like thunder, and in that charged silence, a woman's voice rang out from row 3, clear and unwavering. "Excuse me, I'm Elena Vasquez, a journalist with the Washington Post. I have documented this entire incident. What is happening here is a public civil rights violation." Gasps erupted. Whitney's face drained of color. Morales stiffened. Lena froze. Amara did not need to add another word. A faint smile curved her lips, and with it, she delivered the message. To the cabin, to the thousands watching online, that the real storm had only just begun. Within 10 minutes, the first-class cabin had transformed into a public stage. Every phone held aloft was no longer discreet, but burning like a torch. Passengers were no longer pretending to read newspapers or scroll iPads. They angled their cameras, capturing every glance, every word. And in the back rows, Mia Nguyen had suddenly become an accidental field reporter. "We are live from JFK, Aurelius Air. Do you see this? This is discrimination happening right before our eyes." Her voice trembled, but rang clear, the live stream shaking as a storm of comments poured in. The viewer count surged. 50,000, 80,000, 120,000. Comments scrolled non-stop. "She has to hold her ground. This is disgusting. Record it. Record it. This is living proof." Whitney Carlyle began to lose her composure. Her face flushed red, her shrill voice cutting through the air. "This is outrageous. I've flown this airline for over a decade. I have platinum status. I deserve this seat." Amara did not answer. Just one calm gaze, and within that silence lived the weight of a mountain, built from years of endurance. Her silence itself was a declaration. Captain Rafael Morales wiped sweat from his brow. He knew every word, every gesture of his was now being broadcast onto hundreds of thousands of screens beyond the cabin. The more uncertain he appeared, the more he found himself trapped in the snare of his own bias. Suddenly, an elderly woman in row 4 cried out, "She's right! We are witnessing blatant injustice!" Voices followed in unison. "That's right! We demand fairness. Why are you asking her to move?" The force of the crowd surged like a tidal wave. Those who had stayed quiet now raised their heads together. Some gave thumbs up to the cameras, others nodded firmly. Some gripped their armrests with eyes blazing with support. Whitney whipped around, her voice cutting like glass. "You don't understand. She doesn't belong here." The words were gasoline on fire. The live stream exploded. The phrase, "people like you," was clipped, pinned, and tagged with hashtags. Hashtag seat for respect, hashtag you, people flight. In less than 20 minutes, the video crossed 200,000 views. Twitter erupted. TikTok spun trends. Major accounts reposted endlessly. Tweets, clips, and slogans shot out of the cabin like arrows, piercing the heart of the online world. And through it all, Amara remained by seat 2A, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. Inside her heart pounded like a drum. She remembered presenting to a boardroom of silver-haired men, remembered the sting of a journalist asking if she was truly a CEO or just a decorative face. Those ghosts pressed down, layering into this single moment. A moment small in scale, yet heavy with a lifetime of struggle. Elena Vasquez of the Washington Post continued recording, her voice steady and precise. "I am witnessing a public civil rights violation on this flight. This is no longer about a seat. This is about the system." Her words became an instant quote, amplified and shared. News sites picked it up within minutes, headlines screaming, "Civil rights violation, caught at 30,000 feet." Captain Morales tried to reclaim control. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We will resolve this according to procedure." But he knew his authority had weakened. His voice no longer commanded the cabin. Power had shifted to the woman they had underestimated from the start. Whitney trembled, yet clung to defiance. "She just wants attention. Trust me, the airline will side with loyal customers like me, not someone who just happened to buy a first-class ticket." In that instant, Amara slowly lifted her head. Her eyes glimmered with something unreadable. She didn't shout. She didn't rage. She simply said, softly but firmly, "Sometimes silence is a weapon, but today I will not be silent." The cabin erupted. Passengers leaned forward. Phones buzzed non-stop. And outside that sealed cabin, social media had already turned into a storm. The whole world, every gaze, every click, was now fixed on one woman standing beside seat 2A, Amara Blake. And they did not yet know. This storm had only just begun, because her true identity was still the blade hidden in its sheath, waiting to be drawn. The first-class cabin, once accustomed to the soft chime of crystal glasses, now echoed with words sharp as a blade. Whitney Carlyle ground her teeth, eyes blazing, and spat out venom her laced syllables. "People like you don't belong here." A deadly silence fell over the cabin. No more murmurs, no more tapping on phones. Only the sound of strained breaths and racing heartbeats from dozens of witnesses. Then, like a delayed explosion, gasps broke out. "Oh my God! Unbelievable!" In row 3, Elena Vasquez of the Washington Post tightened her grip on her recorder, her eyes flashing. This was no slip of the tongue. It was living evidence, the mask torn away, a crack that could never be sealed. Mia's phone buzzed non-stop as the live stream surged past 300,000 viewers, comments flooding like a torrent. Did she really just say that? Pure discrimination. This is history in the making. Record it now. Amara Blake stood unmoving, her spine straight as a pillar in the storm. Her heart pounded violently, yet her face remained calm, almost cold. Her eyes swept across every face, some bowed in shame, others frozen in fear, a few meeting hers with solidarity. She remembered a shareholders' meeting the year before, when an investor had asked bluntly, "Are you sure you have the experience to lead, or were you chosen because of your race?" That wound had never healed, and now it stared her in the face in the form of Whitney. Amara drew in a breath, then answered in a low, steady voice, "This is not just about a seat. This is about dignity. And I will not move." The words were brief, yet sharp as an arrow slicing the air. A woman in row 4 whispered, "Yes." A young passenger gave her a thumbs up. No one could pretend not to see any more. Whitney gave a shrill laugh, her voice straining to cover her falter. "God, you're making a fool of yourself. Platinum members like me have always been valued here. I deserve this seat more than you." But her tone trembled, stripped of the certainty it once carried. The tide had shifted. The crowd was no longer on her side. Captain Rafael Morales, still standing in the aisle, locked his eyes on Amara. He wanted order. He wanted the flight to depart. But the weight pressed heavy on him. He knew every word he uttered now could be clipped, shared, turned into evidence. Amara turned her head toward him. Her voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the cabin. "When the one who is right is forced to step aside, and the one who is wrong is rewarded, that is not fairness. That is prejudice." Morales swallowed hard, his hand tightening on the seat back. Passengers stirred, murmuring, phones lifted higher, all waiting for his response. Elena Vasquez seized the moment, her voice cutting like steel. "Captain, will you stand to protect the passenger with a valid ticket, or will you protect prejudice?" The challenge landed like a hammer blow. Morales did not answer at once, sweat beading on his forehead. Never had he been cornered like this. Whitney rushed to fill the silence, her words shrill but shaky. "She's just trying to get attention. I'm a loyal customer. I know the airline will side with me." Amara turned back slowly, her eyes cold as ice. And for the first time, a faint smile curved her lips, razor, thin as if etched into the air. "You think the airline will stand with you? Because you don't know who I am." Gasps rippled. Chairs shifted. Eyes widened, locked on Amara. For a moment, it felt as though the air had been sucked from the cabin. A hidden truth was beginning to surface, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. She had not revealed her identity yet, but every look, every word, every gesture had planted the sense that this woman was more than a passenger. The live stream exploded further, hashtags rocketing to the top of global trends. Outside the cabin, millions of eyes bore witness. Inside, Whitney began to tremble. And in the center of the storm, Amara Blake stood firm, her gaze burning with fire, signaling that the coming revelation would change everything. Inside the first-class cabin, the tension had reached boiling point. What Whitney Carlyle did not realize was that her words had already escaped the cabin and were racing into the outside world. On Mia Nguyen's phone screen, the number of live viewers spun upward, 500,000 people watching in real time. Comments poured in like a flood. "This is the clearest evidence of discrimination. Do not stay silent. She is standing for all of us." #Seat for Respect. Push this hashtag to the top. Within 10 minutes, #Seat for Respect had climbed into the top 5 global trends. Major accounts, journalists, actors, activists shared the clip with outraged captions. In a cafe a few miles from the airport, a group of students shouted in anger as they streamed the live feed. In a law firm office in Chicago, young attorneys were already debating how to analyze this as a textbook case of civil rights violation. In millions of living rooms, dormitories, and hallways, eyes were glued to screens, unable to look away. Meanwhile, at Aurelius Air Headquarters in Midtown Manhattan, a social media supervisor went pale. He muttered, "No, this can't be happening." His fingers shook as he clicked on the hashtag. The image of a boarding pass bearing the name Amara Blake filled the timeline. Her calm face in the cabin, her steady gaze, was being shared at the speed of light. Within minutes, executives' phones were ringing non-stop. Messages from partners, investors, and international media flashed. "What is happening on Flight 8447? An emergency boardroom meeting was called. The communications director wiped sweat from his brow. "We need a statement. Immediately." The CFO slammed the table. "No, we need to know who this woman is because everyone is calling her name. Amara Blake. Why does that sound familiar?" A stunned silence fell. Then a trembling voice. "Blake, she isn't just a passenger. She is the largest shareholder of Aurelius." The room exploded like a thunderclap. Someone dropped a pen, whispering, "Dear God." In the cabin, Amara remained silent, still standing beside seat 2A. But that silence resounded like a declaration. She did not need to shout. The world outside was shouting for her. Whitney, on the other hand, began to falter. Her phone buzzed violently in her bag, messages flooding in. "You're live on camera." "Step back. You're destroying yourself." Yet Whitney clung to her arrogance, forcing a smirk. "Go ahead. Film all you want. The airline will never choose someone like her over a platinum customer like me." The words left her mouth, and an uproar erupted. This time, it was not whispers, but public outrage. A passenger stood abruptly. "Enough. We cannot stay silent any longer." Another raised a phone directly at Whitney, eyes burning with anger. Mia whispered into the live stream. "Do you see this?" She still believes her privilege will save her. The viewership hit 800,000. Comments scrolled at lightning speed. "Arrogance. This will be a historic downfall." In that moment, Amara closed her eyes briefly. Her breath was steady, but her heart raced. All the years of enduring doubtful stares, all the times she had been underestimated, now converged into this single instant. She opened her eyes, met Whitney's gaze, and spoke in a voice low but unwavering. "You think the airline will stand with you, but you don't realize this storm has already left the cabin. The whole world is watching." Whitney froze. For the first time, the confidence on her face cracked. And just then, the cockpit door swung open. Captain Morales reappeared, his face ashen. He had just received an urgent alert from the ground. Millions of people were watching live, and the board of directors was in full alarm. Panic flickered in his eyes. He understood this was no longer about a seat dispute. This was an earthquake that could swallow the entire airline, and his own career with it. The sound of frantic typing on phones still echoed across the cabin, like the chaotic orchestra of a storm of public outrage. Mia Nguyen's livestream had already surpassed 1 million viewers. Yet while the entire world buzzed, Amara Blake remained silent. That silence was not weakness. It was a form of power. She calmly lowered herself into seat 2A, placed her handbag neatly on her lap, and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up. An unfamiliar application appeared. Not Instagram, not Twitter. A blue icon with the insignia of Aurelius Air Internal Command. Her fingers moved quickly, entering a sequence of characters. The words flashed across the screen. CEO, access verified. A passenger nearby gasped. "What is that? Why does her phone have the interface of the airline's command system?" Cameras immediately zoomed in closer. Mia focused her live stream, and the online audience erupted. Oh my God, did she just hack into the system? Impossible. Only top executives have that clearance. Who is she, really? Whitney Carlyle, still trying to maintain her composure, forced a laugh. "It's just a childish trick. Anyone can fake an app. She just wants attention." But her voice shook, stripped of its earlier certainty. At that very moment, Captain Rafael Morales' radio crackled. "Flight 847, this is ground control. Override from corporate authority. Requesting immediate return to gate." The cabin shook with shock. Morales froze, his eyes widening at Amara. He understood. Such an order could only come from the highest authority in Aurelius. Every gaze turned toward Amara. She lifted her head slightly, her expression calm, the corner of her lips curving like a blade slicing through the air. And for the first time, she spoke, her voice cutting through the breathless silence of the cabin. Perhaps it is time I introduced myself. I am Amara Blake, majority shareholder and chief executive officer of Aurelius Air. Which means, Mrs. Carlyle, this seat is not only mine. This plane is mine as well. The cabin erupted. Gasps, cries, the relentless clicking of phones filled the air. Whitney's face drained of all color, her lips trembling, her confidence shattered like glass. A single pair of hands began clapping, then two, then three. The applause swelled into a roar, a rolling wave that would not end. Mia's voice broke on the live stream. Do you see this? This is the truth. The woman they dismissed is the one who runs it all. The viewership surged past 2 million. Whitney stammered, I didn't know. I didn't mean. But her excuses drowned beneath the crashing wave of public fury. Amara fixed her with a gaze, her tone icy but steady. You should not need to know who I am in order to respect me. My ticket was enough. My dignity was enough. What you lacked was that respect. Cheers erupted, echoing like thunder. A historic moment had been sealed in Seat 2A. At headquarters in Manhattan, the crisis executive buried his face in his hands. Every screen replayed the moment Amara revealed her identity. An aide muttered, "Our own CEO has just turned us into a global example." Meanwhile, in the cabin, Whitney shrank into her seat, her platinum aura shattered into shards. And Amara, in her ivory blazer, phone screen still glowing with internal command access, sat tall, her eyes no longer those of an ordinary passenger. She had become the center of the world, an unthinkable reversal, revealed in an instant. The thick glass doors of Aurelius Air headquarters in Manhattan seemed to tremble, as if they too had heard the explosion from first class. The moment Amara Blake revealed her identity, the financial markets shook. Giant trading screens glowed red as Aurelius stock plunged 12% in just 15 minutes. Analysts were stunned. Phones rang without pause. What is happening on Flight 8447? Did their CEO just live stream exposing her own company? News spread faster than a plane could take off. In the emergency boardroom, the CFO hissed through clenched teeth. If we lose the $5 billion logistics contract with Nexora Tech, this company is finished. The communications director went pale. No one cares about contracts. The world only cares about that clip of her saying, "This seat, this plane is mine." It has already passed 5 million views. Inside the cabin, Whitney Carlyle sat as though strapped to an electric chair. The phone in her pocket buzzed violently, but she dared not take it out. Messages from friends, colleagues, even from the board of her family's real estate firm, were certainly flooding in. Her face drained of all color. Her lips trembled. The woman who once believed platinum was a shield of power had now become the symbol of arrogance, crushed. Passengers began to shift openly. A man stood, looking directly at Whitney. "You should apologize." A woman raised her phone high, her voice sharp. "Everyone heard what you said. You cannot deny it." Whitney stammered, I didn't mean. But her excuses sank into silence, no one willing to listen. Meanwhile, Amara sat still, back straight, eyes deep and unflinching. She no longer needed to say a word, because the public had spoken for her. Applause broke out, spreading like a wave across the cabin, swallowing every protest. Elena Vasquez, the seasoned journalist, scribbled quickly in her notebook. A black female CEO flips the script on her own flight, a moment that changes the airline industry. She knew this would be front page by morning. Mia Nguyen kept streaming, her voice trembling with emotion. We are witnessing history, from one seat to a revolution. The viewer count surged past 3 million. The hashtag #Seat for Respect hit #1 worldwide. In Washington, a congressman tweeted, "If even the owner of the airline is treated this way, what chance does an ordinary passenger have?" The tweet was shared 200,000 times within an hour. In living rooms across the country, parents pointed at the screen and told their children, "See that? Courage is not staying silent. That is respect." Back in the cabin, Whitney finally dropped her head, burying her face in her hands. The whispers around her cut like knives. That's the woman who thought she was untouchable. Amara looked over, neither smiling nor raising her voice. She spoke with calm finality. The price of arrogance is self-destruction. Just one sentence, but it rang like a final bell. Whitney had nothing left to cling to. Outside, at Aurelius' headquarters, executives scrambled to find a way to salvage the disaster. But they knew the truth. This crisis was no longer in their hands. It was in Amara's. The woman they had forgotten was the true owner all along. The storm that erupted from Seat 2A had now spun far beyond control. It was no longer just a viral clip, but had turned into a political and economic earthquake. In Washington, D.C., the headquarters of the FAA burned bright through the night. On the giant screen, the video of Whitney Carlisle uttering the words, "People like you don't belong here," played on repeat. An inspection director exhaled heavily. If even the CEO of the airline is treated this way, what about the ordinary passengers? Another answered in a hoarse voice. "We have no choice. We must launch a full investigation immediately." The news leaked within an hour. Major television networks rolled the red ticker across their screens. FAA investigates Aurelius Air for discrimination on Flight 847. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers seized the moment. A black female senator stood tall before the cameras, her voice like steel. "We will hold hearings, not just with Aurelius Air, but with the entire airline industry. This is the moment the system must be held accountable." Her words spread, shared hundreds of thousands of times. Netizens added a new hashtag, #SkyForAll. The sky belongs to everyone. Meanwhile, in Europe, major airlines convened emergency meetings. The CEO of a German carrier whispered to his board, "If Aurelius falls, we may all be dragged down with it. We must prepare reform plans now." In Asia, a Japanese airline released a statement. "We pledge that every passenger will be treated with dignity, without discrimination." The movement had gone global. Back in the cabin, the passengers were no longer just spectators. They had become witnesses to history. A middle-aged man muttered, "We are no longer on a commercial flight. We are in the middle of a social turning point." Whitney sat curled into herself, her face vacant. The eyes cast on her were no longer only furious, but tinged with pity. The platinum aura had collapsed, leaving only a trembling figure, small beneath the glow of dozens of phone cameras pointed at her. Amara Blake was different. She sat upright, her white blazer still crisp, her face serene as though she were orchestrating the storm outside. She spoke little, but every gesture, every breath carried the message. This was no longer a personal dispute. This was a truth the entire world had to confront. Elena Vasquez typed furiously, knowing tomorrow's article would strike deep into the history of aviation. She glanced at Amara and thought, this woman is not just defending her seat. She is redefining the very concept of power. At Aurelius Air headquarters, panic had curdled into despair. Shares fell another 8% within the hour. Nexora Tech, their $5 billion logistics partner, sent a terse email. We are reviewing the contract. The CFO buried his head in his hands. The communications director trembled. There is no statement we can issue that will excuse this. Any apology will be crushed under the weight of the truth. Another executive blurted out, if she really wanted, she could topple this entire board tonight. Silence fell cold over the room. They knew it was no longer a hypothetical. In the cabin, Amara glanced down at her phone. A notification flashed from her personal assistant. Do you want to suspend the flight and issue a CEO statement? Amara allowed herself a faint smile, her eyes burning like foam beneath ice. She typed 3 words. Not yet. She understood that for the storm to reach its maximum force, she needed to let her opponents destroy themselves first. The final revelation was not yet due. Around her, passengers whispered, social media raged, governments intervened, and the global aviation industry teetered. And at the center of it all, Amara sat, the eye of the storm, her composure so steady it left the entire world holding its breath, waiting to see how she would strike. The plane still sat motionless on the runway, engines humming idly as they waited for orders. But every passenger knew this flight had veered onto a different trajectory. No one thought about takeoff times or distant destinations anymore. Every eye was fixed on the woman in the ivory blazer, quietly holding her phone in her hand. Amara Blake. Whitney Carlyle shrank into herself, each vibration from the phone in her purse pounding against her chest like a hammer. Messages from friends, colleagues, even her own family flooded in. You're being filmed. Everyone has seen it. Laws, stop, Whitney. You're destroying yourself. Her dry lips could only stammer meaningless words. I didn't mean to. I didn't know who she was. Amara turned, her gaze sharp as a blade. That is the problem. You don't need to know who I am to act with decency. My ticket was enough for me to be here. My dignity was enough. You are the one who turned it into a battle. The space fell silent, then erupted into applause. Some clapped fiercely, others shouted, "That's right!" Support rippled through the cabin. Whitney curled further into herself, her whole body trembling. At Aurelius Air headquarters, the emergency meeting had dissolved into chaos. The screen glowed red with plunging stock prices. The CFO cried out, "We've lost 20% of our value in just a few hours. If Nexora Tech cancels the contract, this will be catastrophic." Another executive spoke with a trembling voice. "She is the real CEO. We no longer have the power to salvage this. She will decide the fate of the company." At that exact moment, Amara typed a short command into her phone. The screen flashed. "Corporate Directive, Flight 847, return to gate." The captain's radio crackled with urgency. "Flight 847, directive from the CEO. Return to gate immediately." Captain Rafael Morales froze for a second, then lifted his gaze toward Amara. He no longer doubted it. Every ounce of authority in the airline rested in the hands of this woman. The cabin shook with astonishment. Passengers looked at one another, jaws slack. A man whispered, "She just ordered the entire flight." Mia, her live stream trembling, choked out, "This is the first time in history a CEO has issued orders directly on her own plane, before millions of witnesses." Whitney sat stunned, her hands limp. The smug smile she once wore as armor had vanished, replaced with eyes brimming with tears. I'm sorry." Her voice faded, lost in the roar of applause that surged around Amara. Amara rose, the cabin lights gleaming off her white blazer, her voice resonant, warm yet unyielding. "Apologies cannot erase prejudice, but they can be a beginning. Remember this. Platinum is not a license to insult others. Respect is the only ticket that grants anyone a seat here." The cheers thundered. The live stream soared past 5 million viewers. Hashtags, #seat for respect, and @Amara Blake exploding worldwide. In that moment, Amara understood. This was no longer about one seat. This was the decisive blow. A reminder to the entire airline industry, to the entire system built on privilege and bias. She swept her eyes across the cabin, her gaze blazing. "Today, we are not only witnessing a passenger keeping her seat, we are witnessing a principle. Dignity cannot be bought with reward points or platinum cards." The applause rolled like thunder, echoing from first class to economy. Even the flight crew stood frozen, eyes glistening. At headquarters in Manhattan, the communications director let his phone slip from his hand and whispered, "It's over." She didn't just defend a seat. She turned it into a declaration. And inside the cabin, Amara Blake, the woman once underestimated, now held the entire world in her hands. One decisive blow, one stunning reveal, and a wave of reform that could not be undone. The plane slowly rolled back to the gate. Outside the windows, the flashing lights of media vans were already waiting. Dozens of cameras tracking the aircraft as if it were carrying a head of state. Inside, the air was tight, every passenger aware that they had just become part of history. Amara Blake rose, her white blazer perfectly pressed, her face composed. As she stepped into the aisle, passengers stood as one, their applause crashing down like a storm. Some wept, some held up phones, live streaming the moment. Whitney Carlisle sat collapsed, her hair disheveled, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The eyes fixed on her were no longer fearful, but bore witness to someone who had once believed herself untouchable, now crushed by her own privilege. On the tarmac, cameras flashed in a frenzy. Amara said nothing to the press, offering only a slight tilt of her head. Her silence thundered louder than any statement. Meanwhile, At Aurelius Air headquarters, the board of directors watched the tidal wave of news in stunned disbelief. Every drafted statement was useless. They understood now. Their CEO had redefined the crisis, and all they could do was follow. In the days that followed, the impact spread like wildfire. The FAA released a new directive: mandatory anti-bias training for all flight crews. Congress convened a hearing. If even the owner of the airline can be denied dignity, what chance does an ordinary passenger have? Airlines around the globe were forced to issue statements. We pledge that the skies belong to everyone. On social media, the clip of Amara declaring, "Dignity cannot be bought with a platinum card," became a rallying cry. It appeared on T-shirts, banners, and posters in windows. The hashtag #SkyForAll surpassed 50 million mentions within 48 hours. Whitney Carlyle became the symbol of arrogance undone. Her family's real estate company lost contract after contract. Her name itself became a verb in mocking memes. Don't pull a Whitney. Amara, instead of celebrating, chose action. She convened a global press conference. Before hundreds of cameras, she declared, Flight 847 was not just a flight. It was proof that the system is broken, and we will fix it. Aurelius Air pledges to create a scholarship fund to train young people who have been pushed out of aviation, because change does not come from apologies. It comes from action. Applause thundered, but the peak came when she paused, looked directly into the cameras, and her voice softened. I do not want my legacy to be a delayed flight. I want it to be a generation who believes that no matter who you are, you deserve a place in the sky. All over, people who had faced discrimination nodded through tears. Parents told their children to remember. Teachers brought the clip into classrooms. Activists used it as an example of courage and dignity. In her newsroom, journalist Elena Vasquez typed the final line of her front-page story. That day, one woman held on to seat 2A, but the world understood she had held on to far more than a seat. She held on to dignity for millions. In a quiet corner, Amara read a message from a young man online. Because of you, I believe I can become a pilot. A small smile broke across her face. She knew the legacy had already begun. The cabin of Flight 847 was now only a memory, but its echoes would never fade. Justice had been served, and from that justice, a new legacy was born. In a world where a single seat can expose an entire system, Amara Blake proved that true power does not lie in hidden influence or titles, but in the resolve to hold on to dignity. One refusal to move shook the entire airline industry, turning seat 2A into a symbol of justice and legacy. If you believe that respect should be the default, not a privilege, press like to help this story spread. Do not forget to subscribe to join us on the journeys ahead, where truth will be revealed and justice will never be forgotten. Leave a comment with the 2 words, human dignity, as a reminder that no matter who you are, you deserve a place in the sky.